U.S. economy? Is it on the verge of a double-dip recession?
I don't know. I can tell you what I believe should be done. They're having this G20 meeting now. It's dominating all the news. You pick it up, that's all you'll see. They're arguing about whether the biggest problems are continued slow growth and jobless recovery on the one hand, or the massive assumption of debts by the wealthiest countries on the other. The conventional economic answer to that is that the economic contraction is a bigger problem because inflation is low. And we should still keep stimulating the economies. The U.S. Congress doesn't want to do that. The Europeans seem even more hard over. The new British Prime Minister has presented this very austere budget. Problem is, he's not going to be able to balance his books if the austere budget prevents investment and job creation, and then the revenues will drop so much the budget won't mean anything. On the other hand, all these countries are right to be concerned about this because in this last decade especially, so much of the world's cash has been concentrated in the export surplus countries like China, so that America now has to borrow from other countries 1/2 of all of its deficit financing. It's the reason I opposed President Bush's tax cuts. I never had any money until I got out of the White House, but I've done reasonably well since then. And I thought it was outrageous for us to be fighting 2 wars and giving me 5 tax cuts. I thought it was the dumbest thing I ever heard, and borrowing the money from China to do it. And then we got to where we couldn't enforce our trade agreements, so trade enforcement dropped by 80%, giving rise to legitimate objections to expanded trade by the labor unions in America and others, because we had 20% of the enforcement actions we had in the previous 8 years. So the debt's a problem. If there is a way out of this, I would say it is this. I don't think we should move to austerity too quickly because you could trigger a second recession. That's what happened in 1937 with Roosevelt. And I hate these deficits. You remember, I had 4 surplus budgets out of my 8. I'm a very fiscally conservative person, but you can't get milk out of a turnip. It won't. You got to have somebody's got to be there making money to pay taxes. So here's America could lead, in my opinion, could lead the world out of a lot of this if we were more like Willie Sutton, who robbed banks because that's where the money was. Our budget is broken, but we have more than $1.5 trillion in American banks uncommitted to loans. So what I think government policy should be designed to do is to make it easier and more secure for banks to make legitimate loans. I'm not talking about subprime mortgages. I'm talking, for example, we got 25% unemployment rate in America among construction workers, 2.5 times the national average, for obvious reasons, right? This whole thing started with a housing collapse. So what should we do? We ought to have a loan guarantee program for anybody who will do energy retrofits on big buildings that aren't about to close. And it won't cost the taxpayers anything, really, because all those big projects are already guaranteed by the energy service companies that put in the technology. So we could get half of our greenhouse gas reductions in America through efficiencies, most of them in buildings, starting with big buildings that are certainly going to be here 5 years from now, and you'll get savings between 20 and 45%, all of which will be paid off within 5 to 6 years. And if you have a loan guarantee like the SBA, the Small Business Administration loan guarantee, for 90% of it, then banks will loan money to do that. You could put 1 million people to work in 6 months in every place in America. That's the sort of thing we need to be thinking about. What other things do we need to do to get the business community to invest and people to borrow and make the banks feel comfortable doing what they could normally do, not doing great speculative stuff? That's the answer. That's the best policy we could follow that would help lead the world out of this recession.